In May of 2016, an Ohio man named Joshua Brown was killed while riding in a Tesla self-driving car when it collided with a semi-truck. It is believed to be the first time an American has been killed in a self-driving car. It is still unclear who was responsible for this accident, despite a 538-page report conducted by the National Transportation and Safety Board. It was first presumed that the Tesla Model S had failed to recognize the large white truck against the clear sky background. However, the government report showed that the car had given at least 13 warnings prior to the crash to instruct the driver to take manual control. As traditional car companies and technology companies alike are racing to get fully self-driving cars on the open market, this very real tragedy brings to mind startling references to a robotic future in which human life is vulnerable to the ability of machines. As of October 2017, 21 states have enacted legislation authorizing the use of self-driving cars.
I did not know that we had self-driving or semi-self-driving cars on the road today. And I guess that makes me feel a little nervous just because I didn't know the technology was there yet, and I only want to go in one if it's going to be 100% safe.
I think there's a potential for driving to be safer from self-driving cars, like in 150 years from now or something. But I think that that would be after a lot of trial and error and some deaths.
As states draft autonomous vehicle legislation, they will have to understand how these vehicles work to create divisions of liability. Fully autonomous vehicles are decked out with multiple types of sensors to derive environmental data. Ultrasonic sensors provide precise location data about nearby objects, while image sensors identify things like colors, signage, and text. Radar determines the distance and speed of surrounding objects, while LiDAR sensors use an invisible laser to map surrounding objects. Combined with the imagery, it provides accurate identification of the car's surroundings. A GPS and computer round the hardware out. The hardware creates an understanding of the changing world around the car. This is processed by decision-making algorithms and turned into actions like acceleration and steering. Here's how it generally works. Vehicles create a world model using training data. The world model is then used to make predictions about unencountered world states. The predictions are evaluated and then used to refine the world model. There are many ways to implement this, including the use of complex game trees, but the important thing to note is that there's no one at the helm explicitly defining this behavior. Instead, the abstract framework runs the show. Though there are several classes of autonomous vehicle, we'll just examine three, which implement this framework technology to varying degrees.
If in fact the car functioned the way it was supposed to, and whatever made it not stop was not foreseeable and it wasn't a design error or anything like that, I think probably no one was at fault. It may be just that the program, got a variable that it was not prepared to deal with.
As car use grew exponentially, so too did auto collisions in the early 20th century. The inability for victims to recoup claims led to mass frustration with highway safety. In 1924, Massachusetts elected Governor Alvin Fuller on a platform of highway safety, parking, speed limits, and unsafe driving. In 1925, Fuller passed the nation's first mandatory Auto Liability Act, requiring drivers to furnish insurance or bonds. It's worth noting that Fuller was one of the nation's largest automobile dealers. He set up an administrative board to regulate insurance, and the Massachusetts scheme served for a role model for the other United States. Nearly every state adopted a similar mandatory insurance scheme, and today's status quo, drivers are liable when they are at fault and negligent in accidents. Driver liability cases are the most significant slice of personal torts in the United States. Auto manufacturers have largely been shielded from common tort claims and are usually only sued when there is a product defect.
In this unit, we will now propose some liability rules that we believe should be imposed on the driver and the manufacturer for hybrid cars in the event of an automobile accident. We will do this by studying the example of a Tesla Model S accident last year and filling out this liability chart in the process. First, let's start with some definitions. When we refer to a hybrid car, we mean a car like the Tesla Model S, which is equipped with Level 2 vehicle automation system. A hybrid car is still a long way from the self-driving cars in sci-fi movies, in that it has certain operational design domains, which are the conditions in which the automated system is designed to operate. The Tesla Model S, for example, can only operate in non-cross-passing traffic. Moreover, even if a hybrid car is within its operational design domain, it is still not supposed to drive itself, and the driver should instead still have his hands on the steering wheel and actively monitor the driving situation. In a hybrid car, because the driver has the power to turn on the automation system with certain limits, the hybrid car has two possible operational modes. In self-driving mode, in driver control mode, the driver drives the car without automation, while in automation mode, the driver drives the car with automation. When the hybrid car is in driver control mode, that is without automation, we believe the liability rules should stay the same as the status quo, since nothing has changed from there to here. However, the picture looks much more complicated when the hybrid car is in automation mode. Now, let's turn to the Tesla Model S accident in question. What happened? On May 7, 2016, driver and owner of a Tesla Model S, Joshua Brown, got into a fatal collision with the truck while in automation mode. A report by the National Transportation Safety Board found the following facts relevant to our discussion. First, the truck driver failed to yield the right of the way to the car against traffic laws. Second, the automation mode was on even though the car was not operating within its operational design domain. Third, Tesla Model S cars had no measure in place to prevent the driver from entering automation mode in non-ODD situations. Fourth, Mr. Brown had his hands on the steering wheel for a mere 25 seconds during the 36 minutes of the trip, against the operational rules of automation mode and repeated warnings issued from the car. And finally, neither Mr. Brown nor the automation system noticed the white side of the truck against the brightly lit sky. Therefore, in accordance with the laws at the time, the same report placed the principal blame on the truck driver and Mr. Brown, while holding Tesla contributorially negligent. In non-ODD situations, the hybrid car is not supposed to be in automation mode, and the car manufacturer has readily available measures, like an advanced GPS system, to mandate driver control mode in non-ODD situations. In other words, the car manufacturer is the ultimate stick because it has the power to prevent the accident from happening altogether in non-ODD situations. Therefore, we believe when accidents occur while the car is in automation mode in non-ODD situations, the manufacturer should be held strictly liable, while the driver should have no liability. Under this rule, Tesla would have to pay up for being strictly liable in Mr. Brown's accident. Such a legal rule would incentivize the manufacturers to ensure with utmost care that the automation mode will not be turned on in non-ODD situations. Level 2 automation system of a hybrid car was designed specifically for its ODD situations. As you recall from 3 minutes ago, in ODD situations, if the driver decides to put the car in automation mode, the driver is still supposed to have his hands on the steering wheel and actively monitor the situation. In other words, both the driver and the manufacturer are sticks with respect to their own task. Therefore, both the driver and the manufacturer should be held to a negligence standard. However, because human drivers have cognitive limits that make them particularly poor at monitoring automation and generally do not perform well on tasks requiring passive vigilance, we propose cutting the driver some slack and holding him only to a recklessness standard.
People are used to driving along with other drivers, and people are more able to anticipate what other drivers will do. But now you kind of are pushing this expectation on drivers of normal cars on the road to be able to drive alongside self-driving cars that they don't understand how they function because it's not a part of our society.
I think what worries me about the implementation of self-driving cars is the idea that they're so new, so people don't know how to use them yet, and there could be like user error, and that could cause more accidents than if they were just people driving the way they've driven for the past 100 years.
Looking now to liability rules for fully automated cars, we will see that the software firms shoulder most of the liability that drivers today face. Firms producing self-driving vehicles will be responsible for safe driving behavior. These firms need to make sure that their vehicles drive according to the rules of the road, even under adverse circumstances. Beyond that, it's up to these companies to make sure they're compliant with state and federal statutes regarding autonomous vehicles. In general, we find that these firms take on dispositional agency, and we accordingly shift more responsibility and blameworthiness to them. This sums up to a standard of strict liability. When an autonomous vehicle is found at fault in a collision, the firm will be liable. The abstract nature of the algorithms makes it impossible to point to a specific fault in the system. Instead, as these companies are the least cost avoider, we place responsibility with them. Hardware manufacturers maintain a similar level of liability. We will still hold them to the same standards of car and part design. More importantly, hardware makers will have a standard of care to make sure that their parts meet software specifications. It's up to the car manufacturers to make sure they don't put a minivan's algorithm into a load-bearing semi. At the end of the day, we still find hardware manufacturers to hold strict liability. As for the owner, well, the owner is almost entirely a situational actor. The owner has no agency in the driving behavior of the car, and so cannot be blamed for accidents. That said, there are still some duties vehicle owners will have. They will need to maintain their cars, both in replacing failing parts and in administering software updates to patch bugs and security holes. Finally, there's a real duty not to make custom modifications. These modifications could impair sensor behavior, cause the car to drive in unexpected ways, and just be plain dangerous. All of this adds up to a standard of recklessness for the owner. They really have to go out of their way to achieve liability here. In the end, we see that the primary shift in liability takes disposition from the owners and puts it squarely in the hands of software firms.
In conclusion, it is believed that self-driving cars will save thousands of lives every year and change the world for the better. Currently, about 94% of car accidents are due to human error, setting the bar low for what self-driving cars need to accomplish to improve the situation. Other benefits are limitless. For example, it's predicted that fewer people will actually own cars once they can drive themselves. This is because car owners will be able to rent out their car when they're not using it by sending it on its own to other locations. Car owners will have the ability to log in to an Uber-like service during work or at night and make money off their car's use. This in turn creates greater energy efficiency and less road congestion. You may also be able to cut down on costs for flights and hotels, since you could sleep in your car overnight as it drives you to far off locations.